And when I first started feeling it, but the easiest way that I can describe for anybody the pain that it was like having, if anyone's familiar with the back in the day of WWF, Yokozuna
What is
and
that?
King Kong Bundy sitting. He was a wrestler. He
Okay.
weighed over 500 pounds. So
Okay.
it felt like you had a 500-pound person on your chest,
Wow.
on your back, because literally for me, the energy to even brush my teeth, get up and go to the bathroom, it was like I ran a marathon. I had literally zero energy. Um, went from breathing aspects of barely being able to feel like I was breathing. Like it was crushing my lungs on every aspect of. It was so hard where I eventually had to go on a ventilator because I was like I couldn't breathe. And then um, headaches, uh, paranoia. Uh, I started to basically get a little bit delusional after like the 15th day. I actually started like seeing things like, and again that was a heavy time for me emotionally. Just of course, still reeling over the loss of Christoph. So I started. I mean, legitimately, I was seeing things like they were like real. That hallucination that they say.
Okay.
Um, a lot of pain throughout my body, aches, headaches, um, everything you could think of, man. As I said, I don't wish that thing on anybody. Like anybody, number one, that has gotten it full blown, they'll tell you it sucks the life right out of you. Like it's like because even when I first went in, they had diagnosed it first because it was in the early stages. It wasn't the worldwide COVID-19 thing yet because I got it fairly early before it went media wide. And it went media wide mainly because of the fact was that when that cruise ship that was stuck somewhere out on sea, some Canadians were on it, some Americans were on it, and of course, anything that's on Canadian television is smaller to American television because there's so many more networks in America. So if something happens with a Canadian per se who's on board or something, people are like, why is this boat being trapped out to sea for 37 days? We don't know why this street. And then eventually, the U.S. media picked it up, and then it went viral. And then, so when I first went in, they were like, it's pneumonia, and I was like, I've had fucking pneumonia before. This was no pneumonia. Like this was something worse because my fever the first week, which was the day that I was with Catherine, it's probably about like maybe about 101, and I thought that was just due to the fact of we had been doing press and doing the event for like 4 days. So I didn't sleep. I was traveling on no sleep whatsoever. So I just figured it was exhaustion. I didn't know what it was because I mean again I didn't know what COVID-19 was or coronavirus. And then probably into like the third or fourth day, it just my fever kept going up and going up and going up. Then I went into the hospital. They checked me in. They were like, you're really low hydrated. So they put me on an IV drip, got some fluids back into my system, and then they sent me home. 2 days later, I was like sweating like so much that it felt like I was shedding pounds. How much I was sweating, and you go from like 1 minute you're like high fever where you're sweating, to the next minute you're shaking, you're cold, like chills at nighttime. And then eventually after that, the breathing started making it worse. Like walking, getting up the stairs to do anything it was really, really tightening. And as I said, for me, I've dealt with health situations in my past. So for me, it's going to be a lot worse for someone like me.
What were your
Someone
issues
that, like, for
before?
example, has
Did
said, like,
you had some pre-existing conditions or something?
yeah, I got stabbed in '98 in a street fight, and it messed up my insides pretty badly. So
Wow.
I've always had issues from because of that. But the thing went for me was it was like, okay, I'm pretty active at not as much as I used to be. But as I said, it was really weird for me going like Catherine after that trip, I called her and I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, I'm a little bit run down, but I'm fine. And her, I think, as I said, being in the excellent condition that she always is in. Because you know how much she's always doing things, always running marathons and on the bike with Dom and et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, okay. Then Greg ended up announcing that he got sick. And I was like, okay, I think it really boils down to on how well you take care of your body prior to this whole situation. If you're an active person, you're probably going to bounce back a lot quicker. Me, I'm not that active as I used to. Plus the underlying conditions, it made my situation a lot worse. So all I tell people, number one, with the situation is that do your diligence when you're out. If you're going to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you're, when they say 6 feet, like for me, do I always wear a mask? No. If I go into a private store and that store says you have to come in here with a mask on, don't be a douchebag. It's their private store. Respect it. Come in there, get what you need, and get out. If you're social distancing, understand. I was already social distancing before it was a hashtag. Just because for me, I'm a private person in my personal life. So I'm not around a lot of people to begin with. But even when I'm out, I'm trying, which is what's mind-boggling to me, the nonsense that from the get-go. Keep your distance. Wash your hands. Ask yourself this question. If someone needs to tell you to wash your hands before this pandemic, then you seriously have some issues. Because I don't know any person that doesn't wash their hands in general. If you're out in a public setting, if somebody was this close in my face and I don't know them, there'd be a problem. Because again, why would you be coming that close in general to somebody in the get-go? So you're already going to be 6 feet. Normal people would be going about their business 6 feet. If I walked up to Ron and got up in your face, I didn't know, you'd be like, yo, dude, why you up in my face? And what this whole thing is about, even the lockdown. The lockdown's not about numbers. Because we understand, we've done that. We've been in lockdown since March. We've did this thing for now 6 months. And it hasn't shown any major difference other than the economy taking a hit and people, number one, doing what they do, being puppets. Because understand, it's just like, for example, we're in this divide right now in the country. Trumpers, non-Trumpers. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's sitting in that office. It doesn't matter who's sitting in that chair. The people that are in power don't make the rules. The legislation of the laws, that's what makes the rules. These are people that are put in front of our faces every single day to basically tell us, do this and do that. And if you find in society, majority of people, number one, what I like to say, we have a lot of sheep mentality, not a lot of lion mentality, in the sense of wolves. Because more people will rather be told what to do than be put in the position of power to have that responsibility, to have all that weight on the show. It's like for you being a lead actor when you were on B&B driving that show. It's a lot of pressure. If you drop the ball, the rest of the show falls. If you're in a lead movie and you're the lead actor of the film, or you're the director of the film, it's your job to lead everything forward. But most people don't want that responsibility. That's why you see most actors in the early stages, and when we first started in this game, you could just be actors. Now the game has changed. You got to be actors, directors, producers to have longevity in your career, because the business, it changes all the time. The same way with power. It changes all the time. You could put Trump, you could put Obama, you could put Reagan, you could put Hillary, you could put whoever in that chair. It doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, we as the people, we decide really in reality our lives. Because at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, even for you living on this earth, Ron, as long as you have, whether you vote, whether you don't vote, for every situation that you've been in your life, every bad situation. So for example, we were both at Christoph's funeral. Was the president at Christoph's funeral? Was he?
The President of the United States?
Was he at Christoph's funeral?
I didn't see him. Did you?
No, because he wasn't there.
No.
When you got your first job at B&B, was that a result of your hard work and your talent, or was it with the result of a president? It was a result of your hard work and your talent. Everything that happens in life, in the sense, number one, that I have gone through, it has never been anything to do with who's in power. That's why I don't get involved in politics. I don't care what they do, because at the end of the day, it doesn't affect my life. I am still going to go out there and do what I have to do to live my life. And that's what people need to start doing in order for this shit to end. To go out there and stop living your life, stop going on social media and bickering and fighting and battling of this and that, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. We all die. We all only have one life.
I think what you're saying about, you mentioned before this year, 2020, being so important. And I think that's an important message of people just spending the time to enjoy your life and have a happy life. Get off social media a little bit each day. Don't be obsessed with it. And for me, my main message would be stop listening to the mainstream media. They're making the world crazy with the messages and the hate and the stuff that that they're promoting. I want to say this to everybody that's listening. I don't feel like we have an issue, a pandemic of racism in the United States. I don't feel we have that at all. I don't know any friends that are racist. I don't know any friends that were racist. I haven't lived a life of that at all. I have friends of all different persuasions of everything, including genders and all, and we're all getting along great. But the news constantly promotes they want us to be separated by gender and identity politics. And I don't believe that's actually going on with the world. But the news keeps hammering us with this information to the point where people are getting crazy and people are thinking we have a real racist problem in the United States. Maybe there are circumstances that happen, but I don't think it's a pandemic of it. I think most people get along great, but you don't hear about the people getting along great. You hear about the stuff that, the couple of problems that happen, like the one building that's burning in the city. That's what the news is going to show you, and it makes it look like the whole city's on fire. The one incident that happens, they're going to show you that one. When the 99 and 9/10 and 999% of the percentage of stuff is fine. But we are so affected by the news now that it's hard to get away from it unless you literally stop listening to all that stuff and start living your life, just like you said.
Well, I mean, as I said, when it comes to the racism issue, I've dealt with it my whole life. And I've never been a person that's tried, other than the situation that about, shared a couple of weeks ago that happened with me in the mall. That, for me, was the very first time I publicly ever had to speak on something. Because it wasn't about even a black issue. It was an issue in the fact that shit is going on. And that's been going on for a long period of time. And the thing when it comes to the racism situation, even when it comes to politicians, because you have politicians that will go on the news and they'll say, just like what you said, we don't have a racism problem in my city, or I don't know about a racism problem. And the thing is, when people say that to me, it's usually people, number one, who are of the opposite skin color of me. So you're not going to have that problem because you're not in my situation, or people that look like me in my situation. The difference is that we can't turn a blind eye to it. It's been going on for decades. It's going to be going on when I'm no longer here. So the only thing that we can do right now, and as I said, right now, if this wasn't 2020, where we weren't at home, glued to our phones, glued to our TV, all the things that you're seeing on the media, all the things that you're seeing in your face every day, you'd be oblivious to it because you'd be at work, you'd be taking care of your families, doing whatever you got to do. So it wouldn't cross the radar on your radar screen as much as it's doing right now. And to me, right now, shining a light on it is not a bad thing because people have been blinded by it for so long. Are they doing it in a way that is constructive? No. But on the other hand, as I've said before, sometimes you have to stir a little chaos to bring change.
Well,
Nothing has ever happened. Yeah.
Let me ask you, you've been around the entertainment industry for so many years, and you have a lot of friends in all different capacities of the business that we have been doing for many years. Other than your experience a couple of weeks ago, which you told me about, have you in general experienced like a massive amount of feeling of racism against yourself? Or has it been a small percentage that it's irritating and you can't stand it when it happens? None of this can happen. I've had certain things happen to me as well, but the percentage in comparison to all my friends and all, I know we all love you and we have a lot of friends in common, and I've never known anybody say anything bad about you ever, or even I don't see your color. I don't see any of that shit. I don't see any of that. But I'm asking, is your experience in your life really great, or is it fortunately a smaller percentage, but it still happens sometimes?
When I was younger, where I grew up, where I was, a lot. It was heavy. But for me, it's what drove me into the business. It was what drove me to when people said, even in the get-go, when they were like, because you're trained, I think, when you're in this business. Most people, I mean, there's not many people like us, Ron, who dabble in all spectrums. There's only a few that will stay on the, some people just want to be actors and that's all they do. But for me, I was always a person that said, knowledge is power. And I already have a disadvantage against me because of the color of my skin tone. That's just, period. That's just the way it is. But I can use it to my benefit in the sense of I can navigate through this crazy business with my brain and take the things and the experiences that I've gone through, even with racism growing up, saying, okay, I can use this as a person that, because I have friends, for example, who are of my skin color, and they're always like, when they lose a job or an opportunity doesn't happen for them, they're like, I didn't get this opportunity because I was black. And I was just like, you know what? When you keep pushing that narrative over and over and over and over and over again, either one or two things happen. Either people look at you as a problem and they view everybody in that race category as that problem, or it's you. You, number one, not believing in yourself that you're making this a problem for yourself. So for me, I was like, you know what? I know it's there. I know it's there. And I grew up with a lot of Italians. My friends used to call me Black Machismo growing up as a kid because I literally was around Italians my whole life. I did business with Italians. I was friends with Italians. I even dressed like an Italian at one point growing up as a kid. I had the Indian motorcycle gear and everything else. And I went through my phases, but it was more or less for me saying to myself, okay, I can use this as a way to get in, because I had a business partner and he was black, but he was mixed. And a lot of times when I would come into a business meeting, you get the looks, you get the assumptions, you get, whoa, So I said, you know what? I'm going to navigate through this. I'm going to have my business partner, who was half black, but he didn't look black. I'd set up the meeting. He'd do all the talking. And that helped me navigate into certain meetings with people that I probably wouldn't have got the opportunity to, because again, there's just that stereotype. But once I was able to, I guess you would say, plant my foot in, I always had a plan. It's like a soldier in a mission. You have one directive to complete your mission, to get to the next mission. So for me, it was like, okay, I started off in music. When you hear music, it's the one thing, all of us, you're a musician, I'm a musician. Music, as what they always say, is the universal language of love. It resonates with everybody. There's everybody that has a song or a moment in time in their life when they hear a song that just hits that spot. It connects us. When something is going on, when you're feeling really, really down, you put music on. When you're feeling really happy, you put music on. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a musician. I'm going to entertain. I remember the first time I performed in Hawaii in the hula bowl game, and we did the hula bowl parade, and I was like drumming, and I remember like it was yesterday. It was 1993, and there was this little kid in the parade route, and he was there with his mother on her shoulders, and I had to do a drum solo, and the kid was like, "Mommy, look at how fast his hands are moving." And I stopped and I gave a little nod to the kid. But it was in that moment for me why it affected me so much, because I'm going, you know what? In that moment, it wasn't about my color. It wasn't about it. It was about that this person saw something special that they enjoyed, and I was able to give that gift to somebody for that moment, for that kid to remember. And what made me say to myself, okay, I want to go to the next level. So it was like I went from music to the club industry. And then I started running nightclubs at an early age. And I did that for like 15 years, creating environments for people to come and de-stress and have a night out, have a drink, make a love connection. That was my next thing, saying, okay, it's not about black, because when you're in a nightclub, I've always said a nightclub was like Disneyland. You had different races from different organizations of people, black, white, Chinese. But what's the thing that connects them again? Music. You go to a nightclub, everybody's listening to music. They're not caring whether you're black, because we're all listening to the same shit and having a good time to de-stress. The 90s for me, as I said, it was a different time, because again, the racism was there. But for me, because I was always in a position, just like, for example, when you come into a position as yourself, as a musician, as an actor, as a public figure, suddenly people look at you in a different way compared to someone that is not in our business, because we put ourselves out there for the world to see. And you have to decide for yourself, because dude, this business isn't for everybody. Like, it isn't. You have to have a really tough skin, a tough mental prison to be able to control your thoughts, because when the cameras go on, you see that little red light blinking, you transform from Ron Moss to Ridge Forrester, and you try to sort of connect the two. But you're still Ron Moss when that camera goes off. So people grow up, when you're in the business, they love Ron Moss. They love DTeflon. But then when the camera's off, is that same love there? And that's where you find in our business the depression aspect of the business. Because we work and we push ourselves to keep working, because the biggest battle we have, I think all of us, maybe you can agree to this, all of us have as entertainers, is the moment when we're not working, those thoughts, that mental prison that you're in, going, okay, well, what's next? What's the next chapter for me? Where people, number one, they go to their regular jobs, 9 to 5. They collect their paycheck every 2 weeks. they cash their check, they do it all over again. For us, there is no 9 to 5. Our business is 24/7. The real work is when you're not working. So for me, it was like the racism stuff that was always there. I was always just saying, okay, I'm dealing with this, but I'm so busy, I'm not gonna be that guy that focuses on the shit. Of course, I've had some situations. I mean, it's different in the sense of like where what I call the silent racism, where you work in a job and you bust your ass and you kill yourself and you've been there for 5, 6 years. And some person that walks in off the street who you know is nowhere near qualified as you suddenly gets a promotion. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, that's where you see the silent. But again, for me, it was always like, okay, I get it. But one day, my whole thing is like, you know what? Keep underestimating me. Keep looking at me as the person that's the help, the black guy, the whatever. But again, I'm not going to let it stop me because I have one mission to keep.
Let me ask you something. Yep. I'm curious about this. What you're saying. What you're saying is your experience, and I'm very curious about it because for everybody watching D right now, everybody's feeling that you're a real. Tina goes, D is a real survivor. And multiple comments are going, D has such a wonderful positive energy. And you're very thoughtful. I know from years of knowing you how thoughtful and considerate, and you have a huge presence about you. You're a very articulate. You have an imposing presence when you meet this gentleman here in person. D, you have this wonderful sort of big personality presence, even when you don't even speak. You have a wonderful energy about you. And I know you've been through a lot of shit. I know you've been through a lot of hell shit, a lot of stuff. And that has probably obviously made you who you are, helped make you who you are. But
well, that's the reason when you go back to your first question of where Teflon came from, that is it. That was a thing that my one mentor used to say to me. He's like, you've been through more shit that would have killed people. Literally. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. I've gone through multiple health situations. But for some reason, this Teflon won't break. And that's when, for me, it was like, I Alliance Entertainment. And okay, Alliance was me gravitating toward different people from different walks of life, bringing them together. Entertainment is a big word. It's not just music. It's not just television. It's not just film. It's everything. But I'm like, what's my story? And that's when the whole Teflon thing started to grow. And it really grew probably back in the MySpace days when I wrote this blog that literally got over 2.5 million like subscribers. And it was called Love Is Not Enough. And I was going through a messy divorce situation after it happened. And I needed an outlet. And for me, writing and being able, number one, to release that energy was sort of where, for me as a performer, I mean, it's like, for example, why I'm attracted to the series that we're working on right now, which is the Christopher Dorner story. Because just like you were talking about with the media earlier, when we're talking about racism, anyone that doesn't know the Christopher Dorner story, Christopher Dorner was the LAPD officer that went on the 10-day rampage back in LA in 2012. And he killed a couple of police officers. He killed some innocent civilians. And again, it was tragic. And it was very, very sad what happened to those officers. They were heroes. But all the things that you're seeing right now in the media, in the news, the divide, the police violence, all the shit. If you read Christopher Dorner's manifesto, everything that he said in that manifesto is happening today. And our story is going to be very different. It's almost, if you guys have watched the O.J. Simpson with John Travolta, my buddy John Travolta, who did that series on FX series. We all know the story. We all know what happened with O.J. We all know the verdict. But I've always said, when it comes to life, there's three sides to every story. Mine, yours, the truth. And in our story with Dorner, there's only one narrative. There's always been the police side of the story, not about the person, Dorner, a black man in the system, who was a person who was a war vet, came back and said, okay, I'm coming here to protect and to serve my community. And he saw an injustice by his superior officer who was training him, who kicked a schizophrenic man by the name of Christopher Gettler in the head. And when Dorner reported it to his higher ups, which you're not supposed to do in police code, he eventually had the wrath of God by his blue brothers put on him, and they forced him out of the force, and he lost everything. And then when he lost everything, he snapped. And this is the thing that I tell people, number one, is that, like, you have two spectrums of the world. All the things that I've gone through, don't get me wrong, I've had my past. I have, just like anybody else. I've seen things, I've done things, I've gone through things. And I had to make a decision. My life can either go this way or it can go this way. And coming from the life that I lived, the things that I experienced, you know, I was in a gang at the age of 14 years old. I went through a lot of shit in the system, in and out, you know, as a kid. And I eventually had to make a choice. I was like, you know what? I can either take accountability and make the changes necessary to bring a different element where, because you got to understand, us as black men in America, in society, we're seen as three things, Ron. And it's been going on since the beginning of time. We're seen as criminals, athletes, or artists. You got hip hop rappers, you got basketball players, sports players, and you got criminals that are in the system. And understand that's the narrative that's been pushed out since the beginning of time. You don't see us in a position of executives. I mean, we both have worked through the halls of CBS, and you look at all the networks. There's not one black executive in any of those networks. Not one. And every time that something has been to happen in regards to changing that, you look at all the powerful people, you know, from Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby, Michael Jordan. Anytime that we are put in a position of greatness in the sense of what these people accomplished, they didn't accomplish greatness because they were black. They accomplished greatness because they put in the work every single day to be better, just like Kobe Bryant. He was one of the greatest basketball players that ever lived because he had the discipline and the mindset to say, you know what? I can live my life blending in, or I can stand out. So for me, it's like, when people sit there and say to me, okay, well, you're a larger than life personality, I don't really look at it that way. I just be me. I look at the things that I've gone through and the things that I've experienced. And the only thing I try to do is that I'm not perfect. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, but I always say to people, number one, everything in life that you do is a choice. It's a choice. You can either choose to be happy, you can choose to be miserable. You can choose to stay in that shitty relationship with somebody, or you can choose to get out. You can choose to fear a dream, chase a dream, or live a dream. The choice is up to you. So you have to decide for yourself at the end of the day, just like I said with 2020, this shit's going to end. 2020 is going to end. The pandemic is going to end. COVID-19 is going to end. Where do you want to be when this is over? And that's why for me, I'm like, from, you know, facing near death. And I mean, I've openly spoken about this. I mean, mental health is a real thing. I suffer from it. I've been suffering from it for years. And as I said, I mean, when Christoph died, it took a piece of me because 4 years ago, Rod, I was in a really bad spot mentally. You know, things were great on the outside surface, but inside, all the things that I have gone through, they catch up with you because there's only. Yep.
Let me ask you a question that I wanted to ask before when I was talking about your presence and all. I'm very curious. How do people perceive you? I know how you are when we see you, and you've got this wonderful presence, as I said before. You've got this wonderful articulate grace, and you've got a statuesque sort of presence about you, my friend. And I'm curious, when you talk about the racism that you have personally experienced in your later life, let's say now the last 15 years or so, I'm curious, how do you think, how do you perceive people looking at you now? I can't imagine anybody coming up and seeing this wonderful man, DTeflon, in front of me, especially dressed and elegant the way you were at the memorial we went to, and thinking anything about
guys,
some
I don't know
racism
like
thing.
So,
No, this is not the issue. I'm talking about a vibe that you project, which you are projecting now. It has nothing to do with the way you're dressed. It has to do with the way you present yourself. And I can't imagine anybody coming up and going, I'm going to inflict some racist attitude against this gentleman, this personality, this man, this person. I'm curious how you have experienced this in the last 10, 15 years of how do people, if you've had a bad experience, what do you think happens? Because I don't know anybody who would come up to you and see you that I know and go, I'm going to have a racist sort of thing against this guy. There's no way you could. You don't project that stuff.
I don't project it, but it's still projected on me. I mean, it's happened from me going to shopping in a store. Like, for example, you know that I'm just like you. I'm heavily into fashion. I love my suits. So, and they're all usually custom. So when I go into a store, you know, you'll get the.
How does that present itself?
And I mean, it presents itself usually in the sense of like where I'll get an employee that'll say, you know, sir, can I help you? And I'm like, no, I'm good, because I know what I want when I go into a certain store, department store, what I'm going to buy. So for me, it's like if I go into that store, and let's just say, for example, the item is $700, and I walk over to that area, you'll get that employee that will follow me around, even though I've said I'm good. They'll follow me around to the store, and they'll be like, "Are you sure you need some help?" I'm like, "No, I'm good." And I already know in their perception what they're thinking. It's like, you can't possibly be able to afford this, because they look at someone like me, and they think already I should be not in a store of this price range. I should be going over to the.
Can I interject something?
Yep.
Interrupt you?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I went to the complete opposite. I went to, this is obviously somebody who can and is going to afford whatever he wants. So I, as the employee, I want to make sure I'm on this gentleman because I think he's going to buy a shitload of stuff. That's where I would go if I looked at you.
Yeah, but you would think that if I walked in there with a suit. If I walked in here dressed like this, which is normally what I do if I go into a mall or something like that, I'm not done up in a three-piece suit. I'm going in more casual, whatever, and I walk in. But they just make that assumption already of like, okay, well, he can't possibly be able to afford this. And
I
I've
don't
dealt
know,
with
D.
this, but
I got to give you your opinion and all, but I would look at you dressed just like you are, and I would go, there's something else going on with this guy.
but that's you, Ron, because you have
I
character and
know,
you've been around.
I know.
That's the difference. Not every, and this is the whole thing. People, this is what the problem is.
But you don't
We have
project that, D. You don't project any of that shit. You project,
I know.
you project wonderful sort of stuff. Everybody commenting, going, this guy is just a positive energy. He's got a great energy about him. You don't project that stuff. So anyway, we all have our own experiences.
But that's the thing. You don't have, the whole thing is you don't have to project something for somebody to not, like, okay, the easiest way I can explain it, the biggest problem that we have right now in society, just in general, overall, even when it comes to relationships, is social media. We text each other. We Facebook each other. We comment each other. But nobody actually talks to each other anymore. Like back in the day, if you wanted to connect with somebody, you have to either do it in person. If I wanted to meet up with Ron, I'd have to meet up with Ron in person. We couldn't be doing what we're doing right now. So a lot of things that I tell people, number one, before you judge somebody, assume something about somebody, talk to the person.
Right.
So understand, if I walk into a store, we haven't conversed. The first thing they're seeing is just, as you say, the presence. So they haven't had a chance to communicate. They don't even give you the opportunity to communicate. They've already made up their assumption in their head. And then when it comes to the fact of me pulling out the money and saying, okay, yes, I can afford this, suddenly you see the person's attitude change. And for me, I don't make a production about it because I'm in a store. I don't care. I already know what you're thinking. So I told you, I let people have that misinterpretation. And at the end of the day, if you don't talk to me, I really don't give a shit. Because at the end of the day, you don't know me if we haven't spoken.
D, can I make a suggestion?
Yep,
can I make a a suggestion? I'm curious because I want to see if this plays out the way I think it might play out. Next time, you, my friend, my dear friend, who I love and admire your presence and the way you're a little heady with everything, like I am, and I have to fight that sometimes. Being you're constantly analyzing all the stuff and all. Try this, and I want to know what happens the next time you walk into a store and you feel that thing where somebody, you think they're judging you a certain way.
Okay.
Ask them. Go, what are you feeling from this right now? Just like blow them away with a little truth moment of I'm looking for some clothes. What are you feeling right now from me doing this? And I'm curious whether they would be honest enough to go, I was thinking you're probably going to buy a lot of stuff, or I'm just curious what they would say. I'm just curious.
They'd probably say nothing, bro. They'd probably say the politically correct thing they would say. They wouldn't say because most people don't say the truth. They wouldn't.
You're most likely right.
Most people. It's like, for example, when this whole situation with George Floyd. I mean, for me, I had friends, number one, that I've known for years. Now I'm no longer friends with because I saw the racism come out that I didn't even think that they were racist. Because again, it's just like the media, it's just like anything. When George Floyd died, this man had a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he was dead. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. We watched the man get his life taken in front of the entire world. And if that doesn't affect you as a human, Not about black, not about white, not about Chinese, not about what creed or color you're from. That doesn't affect you as a human, then there's something seriously wrong with you. And for me, what angered me about that situation with certain people, number one, was that whenever a person of my color either gets in a situation, either confronted by the police or in that situation, the first thing that someone wants to do is dig up somebody's past to say, well, he was a drug dealer back in 15 years ago, and he did this, or he had a criminal record from this. And the question I always say to people is that because you have a criminal record, does that still make you a criminal for your whole life? Because I know people, number one, that have gone through the system, just like I did when I was younger, and they've turned their life around. Should they have been held with the same brush their whole life when they've made positive changes? They've done positive things for the community. They've done things to make sure that people who are younger in the generation don't make the same mistakes that they do. Should they be crucified for the rest of their life from their past? What makes any person perfect? There is no such thing. So when people constantly use the narrative, well, if he didn't have a criminal past, that wouldn't have happened. Or if he, number one, wasn't here doing this, that wouldn't have happened. Or if he wasn't on drugs, this wouldn't have happened. But it's like we've all known someone who's gone through drug situations, drug abuse. And does that make them a bad person? Does that make them an evil person because they've got a drug problem? If they make a bad decision in life, in their younger days in life, does that make them a bad person for their entire life? No. And this is what happens, is that as soon as something happens, people focus on the negative, and then again, with not knowing who that person was, period. Like, for example, the same situation, Ron. You're loved, and I love you, and you're loved by millions of people all around the world. But the same situation that happened to George Floyd could happen to you, could happen to me, could happen to any person here watching this viewing viewership right now. Any one of us can be in a situation that we woke up one day, planned our whole day out, and then something happens, and our whole day just goes left. And that's why I tell people, number one, is that we don't know what someone has gone through. We don't know what anyone's going through. And the world is such in a fucking divide right now because people have forgot the simple aspect of just being kind, of being kind to each other. Because I've always said, like, when you look at 9/11, 9/11 is what, to me, it's not what's happening right now. 9/11 is what changed everything for the world. That was the day the world completely went like this. But when you look at what happened in New York after those weeks after the towers went down, if 9/11 had happened anywhere else in the entire United States, they'd still be digging themselves out right now. Because 9/11 showed it wasn't about black, it wasn't about white, it wasn't about Muslim, it wasn't about jihad, it wasn't about anything. It was about this tragic event that we have to come together to build. We are only as strong as one unit than divided. But people, for some reason, feel that, okay, well, that person's life is more valuable than another person's life. Or when someone sits there and says, like you said earlier on, you're like, I've been around people, number one, and I've never had to experience, number one, racism, people that I've known, or et cetera, et cetera. And that's fine. That's great. Well, people will sit there and say, well, it doesn't happen either in my area or in my city or in my experience as much. And I always say, forget the as much. It just shouldn't fucking happen, period. We shouldn't even be having the talk about racism. Like Morgan Freeman said, the best way to get rid of racism is to stop talking about it. The best way to get rid of COVID-19 is to stop talking about it. The best way to get rid of the Trumpers versus the non-Trumpers is to fucking stop talking about it. Live your life for you. Make your decisions and live with your decisions and live with your choices. If you make a choice,
live your life in a positive way.
Positive way. If you understand, if you make, I told you, everything in life is a choice, Ron. If you make everyone makes mistakes. But I tell people all the time, mistakes are only mistakes once. Anything after that, it's a choice. You can fuck up once, but learn from that shit. I've made mistakes and I've learned from them. And that's why when it came to the situations that I've gone into, I didn't ask for them. I didn't ask to get beat up by cops when I was a kid. I didn't ask, the bottom line, to be put in the situations that I've gone through with racism, because nobody asked for that. But I'm not going to pretend like it didn't happen. I just don't talk about them. But when I do talk about them, like I did a couple of weeks ago on that video, because I couldn't believe like seeing what you're seeing on the news. And then for me to go into a store and have somebody berate me like that and feel that they had the power to do so and feel that there was no recourse. Because again, when she played the card, you remember seeing the video where she was like, I'm going to call the police. I was like, call them. I'll wait right here.
Do you feel, D, that people respond that way out of fear?
Yeah.
The fear is a
100%.
big motivational factor.
100%.
And I feel like the fear is being perpetuated, from my point of view, by the media so much, and it's being done on purpose. Because when people are in fear, you can control them a little better, and you can make them think that things are happening when they may not be happening, but you control them with the fear. My friend, we're gonna wind this up now. This is actually my longest show ever. I'm very sad.